Hey guys, Noodleham here. I just got a new monitor here from a rather small brand called Pixio. I thought it had a great value, so here I am making a video to share it with you guys. Now, let's get right onto the overview. The first thing I noticed when I got this monitor was its sheer size. To show you how big it is, here is a 13-inch MacBook. Compared to this display right here, the MacBook is tiny. And the monitor I used to have before was an LG ultra-wide 21:9 25-inch monitor. Here it is. Now, basically this display is as wide as a 25-inch 21:9 display. You can see it's a little narrower, but it's so much taller, which means a lot more area on the display itself. On the front, it looks rather low-key. On the three edges around the monitor, you have a very thin bezel, which I measure to be around 1/4 of an inch. On the bottom, you have 5 buttons, including a power button. They allow you to go into the menus, quickly turn on or off the HDR setting, or change the display mode, or another button that allows you to switch the input source. On the side, you can see the top part is very thin, and the bottom part is a little bit thicker. Now, to the back, nothing too exciting, but you can see that there's this mount for the stand that came with the monitor, and you get 4 screw mounts for a VESA mount if you want to mount it on a wall or a VESA compatible mount. Now, at the bottom of the display, I don't know if you guys can see it very clearly, you have a power port, 2 HDMI ports, 1 display port, an audio out, and a USB port that can actually deliver power, though not at a very fast rate. You can tilt the monitor with the default stand too. Downwards, it's about as much as diagonal to the ground. Upwards, I estimate it to be about 30 degrees. That's about it for the physical aspects. Let's get to the stage where we actually test the monitor. To measure the maximum and minimum brightness, since I don't have any professional devices, I used readings from my phone instead. So I got this app that was able to display readings from the brightness sensor. And the way I set it up was I set the monitor's brightness to either 0 or 100%, and I put my phone up close to the screen and moved my phone around until the brightness reading reached a stable value. Using these readings and the reading for which we know the real-world brightness, we can calculate the brightness of the monitor itself. At 100 brightness, my phone displayed a reading of 498, and at 0% brightness, my phone showed a reading of 19. And for the reference reading, I used a Pixel XL phone for which we know the actual display brightness in nits, and then I set the screen to maximum brightness, displaying the same white image. This time, I got a reading of 536. Using this formula, we have a brightness of 374 nits on the high end and a brightness of 14 nits on the low end. One thing to note here is that it's actually brighter than the advertised spec of 350 nits. By looking at this chart, compared to smartphones, the Pixio isn't the brightest out there. But here, having a similar brightness than, say, the Google Pixel XL is actually a very good thing. Since you wouldn't be using the Pixio under direct sunlight, I find the brightness to be more than adequate to work with under all lighting situations. In fact, the range of the brightness in both the high end and the low end is better than all of the displays I've used on a desktop computer before. Here's how I set up the contrast test. I first took a photo of the screen displaying a black image, and then using a different camera setting, I took a photo of the screen displaying a white image. Next, in post-processing, I raised the exposure of the white image by 0.3 stops so that the two images will have the exact same perceived brightness in black and white. By taking into account the difference in camera settings and the exposure I raised, I can get how many times brighter the display is while displaying a white image compared to a black one. The contrast ratio comes out to be 788, which is slightly less than the advertised ratio of 1000, but still pretty good. It's hard to scientifically describe this, but as I used it to do photo editing and video editing, I found the color quality to be very good. The colors are vivid and not over or undersaturated. So the good color accuracy, the high maximum brightness, the high contrast ratio, and the large screen space makes it overall a really good candidate for everyday usage, as well as some of the more professional and creative works. Now, let's talk about gaming. Some of you might be worried that your graphics card will have a hard time driving more pixels than those on a 1080p screen. So I did some tests. I have a GTX 980 Ti, which in today's world is roughly equivalent to an RTX 2060, a GTX 1070, or the new Radeon RX 5700. I ran three popular games, Battlefield 5, Overwatch, and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. In each of the games I tested, I was able to get roughly 95 FPS. So if you have a graphics card that's similar or better than the ones I mentioned earlier, you shouldn't have a hard time gaming at all on this Pixio monitor. The HDR implementation, however, is far from perfect. Here I have two photographs of Battlefield 5 running in HDR on the top and with HDR off on the same monitor with the same settings in the bottom. I picked Battlefield 5 because it's one of the few games right now that fully support HDR. Even though HDR is designed to allow a screen to display brighter highlights and darker shadows, it is not the case with the Pixio monitor. If we turn down the exposure, you'll notice that the top image with HDR on actually has a lower peak brightness. But you do get some benefits. Even though the range of brightness isn't extended, you get more details in the highlights as well as the shadowy parts of the image. So here, if we turn up the contrast, it becomes more obvious that the image on the top with HDR has more detail in the sky, since you can still make out the clouds and the sky from the background. On the bottom one, however, almost everything is bright and the sky is almost washed out. The same goes with shadows. The HDR mode renders the darker areas with more shades of color so that more detail is preserved. I also watched the movie in 4K HDR, and the result was consistent. So with the HDR mode on, the image has a lower peak brightness, but you get more details in the shadowy parts and the highlights, so you can make out things in the shadows and highlights better. I think Pixio really delivers on the gaming and productivity side of the monitor. I have been looking for an upgrade from my old LG ultrawide 24-inch for a while, and when I found the Pixio, I knew this was it. I compared it against the other 1440p 144Hz displays, and despite them being more expensive, they also usually have an TN panel, which would mean they deliver an usually inferior image quality compared to the IPS panel in the Pixio. And coming from an IPS display, I really don't want to let go of that good image quality. Now, should you buy or upgrade to the Pixio? If you're buying a new PC, then the Pixio is your go-to choice. If you currently own a 60Hz or 144Hz 1080p display, and you are looking for an upgrade in either the image quality or the refresh rate, then the Pixio can be right for you too. In addition to offering more pixels, you'll get a better looking image, and a higher refresh rate if you're coming from a 60Hz display, which would mean smoother video games. So it's been a week since I got my new Pixio display, and I really enjoyed it too. Be it watching videos, playing video games like Battlefield 5 and Overwatch, editing photos from my camera, or just reading. The higher resolution, the larger screen size, the high refresh rate, and the reasonable price made it an ideal choice for everyday tasks, gaming, as well as creative works. If you liked my review and want to purchase the Pixio 275H, please, the best way to support me is to click on the Amazon link below, which would allow you to purchase the product at the same price while I receive a small fee from Amazon so I can keep updating my videos. Thank you and see you next time.